say, hey guys, it's Claus. Hey, let's watch Gaussen in his Churchill Ford. Gaussen. That is not a British name. It is not an American name. I'm not sure what that is, but funny, eh? British and American, they both speak English, but, you know, you put a Brit and an American in a room and they wouldn't understand what the hell they were talking about. I mean, you could be talking to like a Brit and have the occasion to hear something like, oh, by George, nudge is as good as a wink to a blind bat, eh? I say. Whereas you may find yourself somewhere in America and you'd hear something like, you keep sweeping the dust underneath the rug and one day you're gonna have to take the broom out to the barn. Know what I mean? It's just, it's the same language, but they would have trouble communicating, you know? Like, I mean, the Brits, they're always using names like Bob's your uncle or by George. You know, they got the names in there of people, whereas the Americans, it's more like, well, at least for some, it's like the animals. Like, don't let the fox into the chicken coop unless you like the eggs sunny side up. You know what I mean? There ain't no how, no way, no more you're gonna let that happen. You know, and if you miss a shot, that British commander, he says, nice shot. And if you miss a shot, that American commander should say, you're luckier than a pig waddling in the mud, tell you that much. There ain't no way you're gonna be finding no pickle in the pickle jar tonight. You wanna find a needle in the haystack, you better be hooking up the tractor to the wagon pole before the sun goes down, if you know what I mean. It's all just, you know, sociological differences and ways that people grow up and the stimuli that they receive through their growing years that kind of dictates the mannerisms and the things they say, and it's deep down inside we're very similar, right? People are people, and there's not a lot of difference. And a sophisticated British person who maybe grew up in downtown London and was exposed to a lot of high society type, very polite intellectual talk may say something like, tut tut old man, good day, righto. Or, you know, some combination of those things, maybe not necessarily in that order, but those type of phrases intertwined with different things within a sentence. Whereas America being a much bigger, vaster place and more wild, especially in certain parts, people are more exposed to kind of the rural aspects of life, and they are infused with different types of thoughts and may say something like, don't think you're going to be eating the bacon until you got the pig all greased up good and ready. Eat your beans good and hot like a man, and when the pressure builds up, lift the left cheek and let her rip, if you know what I mean. Don't be looking under the pickle barrel unless you're ready to put the lid back on it. Don't be reaching for the cookie jar until you holster your weapon first. Tain't no way you're gonna be doing me no harm, no good, no more. But I digress. Let's concentrate on watching Gaussen, who is probably neither American nor British, so has no fucking clue what I'm talking about. As I'm sure many of you have no idea. Consider it part of the intro. That was the intro that we have endured, which sometimes, I admit, one gets carried away with an analogy or, you know, everyone gets carried away in life sometimes, right? Everybody loves somebody sometimes, and not everyone has ever promised you a rose garden. So, like, what did you expect? Yeah, when you came here and started watching. I didn't promise you a rose garden, right? And do you know how much work rose gardens are? Do you know how much work you have to do with all the raking of the soil and the fungi and the composting and all the fertilizers, you know, and the plowing and the constant pruning and watering and all that stuff? It's very complicated, and that is why the British have the nicest roses and rose gardens in the world, right? Because they're meticulous and they can handle all that stuff, whereas an American just kind of needs somewhere he can park his pickup truck. Just pull the 4x4 around the back and hoist her up and have a look inside under the hood, know what I mean? And I'll have you guys know that I am offended that some of you would expect to have a rose garden, right? because I never promised you one. And I know that I may have mentioned that already. And just because I have mentioned it already does not mean that I am not allowed to repeat myself. Okay? Because sometimes when your thought process proceeds in a certain direction, it can be circumnavigated or thrown off kilter, leading you down a different path, which may or may not cross back onto the path that you're originally on, causing repetitive nature of certain forces and things and aspects in the universe that reoccur every now and then, right? Especially after very, very wet weather. Yeah, it's well known that after a storm, there's electricity, right? There's an abundance of electrons. Usually can be predicted by fluctuations in the barometer, but you know, everyone can sense wetness, but not necessarily changes in barometric pressure. And after a good thunderstorm, there's a lot of those extra electrons that are left over that haven't been used up, and that if we could just harness the energy in one fraction of the electrons that are floating around with not to no good use, just a simple small fraction of those on Earth, we could have progressed like orders of magnitude more than we would have having not. And if you don't believe me, all you have to do really is consider the moon, right? Do you realize that that no one has seen the other side of the moon? We have all just seen one side, and no one has seen the other side. Why? Because the moon revolves around the Earth, right? And the Earth spins on a tilted axis and also travels around the sun, yet the moon, which is revolving around the Earth, does so in such a way where it spins one revolution precisely in the amount of time it takes to make one revolution around the Earth, so that the one side of the moon is always facing the Earth. Try that. Even the best knuckleballer could not, Phil Necro, or whatever his name is, could not throw a knuckleball and have a perfect, not spinning baseball. There's all it takes is if one insect were to have bumped into the moon as it was being created, it would have imparted enough angular momentum that the moon slowly would have spun so that we could see the other side eventually, even if it turns slow enough that it would take generations to turn. Yet we have not ever seen the dark side, and Pink Floyd actually wrote a whole musical album about this phenomena. And ask yourself, in what set of circumstances could there possibly be two independent objects traveling in 3 dimensions in such a way that one of the objects would only ever see one side of one of the object, whereas the other object, who only shows one side, gets to see all the sides of the other object? How could you possibly have a situation where, one guy sees it all and one guy only sees like half, and it's all okay and it's all balanced out? How does that happen? What forces of nature have led to a situation, and why? The question is why, not necessarily how. Why? Is there something on the other side that we should know about, that maybe has been put there or is there through some process that we don't understand by someone that we are not aware of, that doesn't want us to see it? Huh? Have you ever thought of that? Have you ever thought that maybe it's not just a 1 times 10 to the 23rd power coincidence that, yeah, well, you can't see the other side of the moon. That's just because it happens to be spinning perfectly in unison with our revolution Yeah, yeah. You think maybe, like, if we actually went on the other side and with one of those, you see those guys on the beach with the metal detector things. If we actually went around there and checked things out, maybe, huh? Maybe there would be something there that closer than we have ever thought to look that is there, observing us. Haha, how about that? You've heard it here first. I postulate, I theorize that there is something on the far side of the moon, which is never, ever in view of us. No one has ever seen it. That if we actually forgot about going to Mars or Jupiter or wherever the hell people want to go, right? I would postulate that if we actually went to the moon again, but this time we landed on the other side, right? The farthest that you can get, never viewed by Earth, and we dug around there, we would find the meaning of the universe. We would discover whatever it is that's hidden there. And don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself. Why? Where else would you hide something if you wanted it to remain hidden? Huh? Have you ever thought of that? The best place to hide something is right under the nose of those looking for it. Why? Because they don't think to look there, right? We're going to look everywhere in the universe for the answers. We've invented those really expensive telescopes that can see so far, and the farther you look in the universe, the farther back in time you observe, right? Because the light that you see so far away in your telescope is so far that it would not get to us for millions and millions of years. And therefore, it hasn't happened yet in our timeline. So the bigger the lens that you use, the farther back you can see. And we've seen right back to just a few microseconds before the Big Bang. We've seen that. It's kind of cloudy and hazy and a little blurry, but we're pretty sure we got it right. And what have we learned? What have we learned by looking back 12 billion years worth of light time continuum? We've invented the biggest, I think there's something bigger than the Hubble now, and we've looked so far back. What have we observed? Nothing. We haven't seen anything. It's dark and there's a few stars. Where's the real answer? The real answer is under our noses on the dark side of the moon, right? That's where it is, and no one's looked. That's the whole point. That's what I'm getting at. You see, you don't have to look outward, far away from home to know the answers. For yourself, happiness is within. You have to look within yourself to figure it out, so that why and how, and make the best of your time, your short time. In geological time, you're here for less than a pencil width, right? And you're not going to find answers anywhere else. You got to look within yourself. And as a species, why bother worrying about a black hole 257,000 light years away when, just the other side of the moon might be far enough to look, and pretty well hidden at that. And whoever it is that has figured it all out and is a lot smarter than us and has control of the universe, that's where they've put it. That's where we've got to look. I'm convinced. And, hey, what do you want from me? I never promised you a rose garden, right? You come here. It's your choice.
Can't let the coyotes run through the field unless you're ready to ride bareback the next day, you know what I mean? Ain't no way you making no sense no how anyway.